In the small, serene town of San Rafael, Tenancingo, nestled among the mountains of Estado de Mexico, mornings are painted with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and homemade tortillas. The streets, lined with adobe houses, echo with the footsteps of generations, each one marked by their shared stories. Here in this seemingly peaceful place lives Valeria Hernandez Morales, an 8-year-old girl with large brown eyes that seem to carry heavy secrets too burdensome for one so young. Her black hair, always neatly braided by her mother each morning before heading to her job at the Hospital General de Toluca, frames a delicate face where emotions flicker intensely, emotions few can understand. Valeria was diagnosed with mild autism when she was 5, after her preschool teacher noticed her struggles to interact with other children and her obsessive need for routine. For Valeria, the world only makes sense when things happen in perfect order. Waking up at exactly 6:30, brushing her teeth for exactly 2 minutes, and always eating breakfast from the same blue plate with yellow flowers that once belonged to her grandmother. Her life revolves around these rituals, small acts that ground her when everything else feels chaotic. "Valeria, my love, I have to go to work," her mother Patricia tells her in a voice tinged with the exhaustion of long shifts at the hospital. Patricia, a 32-year-old woman whose hands are perpetually cold from constant hand sanitizing, gently brushes her daughter's cheek. "Be good with Rodolfo, okay?" Valeria nods silently, not lifting her eyes from her breakfast, her spoon following. The same pattern, 3 circles to the right, a pause, then 3 circles to the left. It's her way of maintaining control when the world seems too overwhelming. Rodolfo Vasquez Santillan, 45, enters the room, adjusting his navy blue tie to match his gray Oxford suit. A man of medium height but imposing presence, his perfectly combed back hair and polished smile have made him a respected figure in the town. As the head accountant for the San Rafael Tenancingo municipal government, Rodolfo manages the numbers that keep the town running, his reputation for honesty and efficiency earning him the community's trust. "Of course she'll behave," Rodolfo says with a smile that doesn't reach his cold gray eyes. "Right, Valeria? Educated girls always listen to their fathers." At the sound of his voice, Valeria tenses, gripping her spoon so tightly that her knuckles turn white. Patricia, however, doesn't notice. Her mind is already elsewhere, calculating how many patients she'll attend to during her 12-hour shift. "I've left money for food on the table," she says as she grabs her work bag. "And don't forget, Lupita will be here at 3 with the pills, for my mom." In San Rafael Tenancingo, everyone knows everyone else's schedule. Doña Carmen opens her little shop at exactly 6 a.m., and Don Esteban sells tamales at precisely 7. The town's central church, built in the 17th century, towers over the plaza, its bell tower ringing out the hours for those who've lost track of time. Sundays after Mass, families gather in the plaza, children playing while the adults gossip. Rodolfo has masterfully positioned himself in this social landscape. Every Sunday, without fail, he occupies the 3rd bench on the right side of the church, contributing generously to the collection for the church roof and always ready to help with the numbers for the town's festivities. "Good morning, Rodolfo," greets Don Aurelio, the local pharmacist, as he sees him walking towards the town hall. "How's the girl? I saw her yesterday, so quiet at the store." "Ah, you know how these special kids are," Rodolfo replies with a sigh that seems to carry the weight of patience and understanding. "Patricia and I do what we can, but sometimes it's difficult. You have to be firm so they learn to behave." Don Aurelio nods in understanding. In a town like this, strict discipline is seen as a virtue, especially when it comes to children who need extra structure. Nobody questions Rodolfo's methods. On the outside, everything appears perfect. Valeria is always clean and well-dressed. Patricia has a stable job, and Rodolfo's reputation remains untarnished. But inside their yellow house on Hidalgo Street, the reality is far darker. When Patricia leaves for the hospital, the silence in the house becomes thick and suffocating. Valeria, feeling the weight of the tension, seeks refuge in her routine. She carefully washes and places her plate back in its exact spot on the shelf, then heads to the backyard to meet her only true confidant, Lobo. Lobo, a German shepherd, with black and brown markings, arrived one February morning exactly 4 months, 2 weeks, and 3 days ago. Valeria knows this precisely because she keeps track in a notebook, marking each day with a small pencil drawing of a paw print. Lobo is not just a large dog with an intelligent gaze. He understands Valeria in a way no one else does. Every time she sits on the rusted swing in the backyard, Lobo positions himself between her and the house, watching over her with the intensity of a protector. When Valeria becomes anxious, rocking compulsively, Lobo places his head on her lap, offering the deep pressure she needs to calm herself. "Good morning, Lobo," she whispers, settling against him under the peach tree her grandfather planted before he passed away. "Did you sleep well?" The dog responds with a soft whine and meets her gaze, something few can do without overwhelming her. With Lobo, it's different. His gaze doesn't suffocate her, it soothes her. Next door, behind a lace curtain, Tomasa Jimenez watches with a mixture of tenderness and concern. A retired teacher with a lifetime of experience, Tomasa has an instinct for understanding children that goes beyond what is spoken. She has noticed Valeria's constant state of alertness, her flinching at sudden noises, and her avoidance of certain spaces in her own home. Something isn't right. But in a town like San Rafael, Tenancingo, appearances are everything, and no one questions the seemingly perfect family. After all, Valeria always looks well cared for, and Rodolfo is seen as a respectable figure. But, in the quiet of that yellow house, the truth begins to reveal itself little by little. ChatGPT John Noy, Doña Tomasa, with 45 years of experience teaching in the Benito Juarez Elementary School, had developed a maternal instinct that extended far beyond her own grown children. Her keen observation skills, honed over decades of watching students and understanding their unspoken signs, had made her perceptive to things others missed. Valeria's behavior, the way she was constantly on edge, flinching at sudden sounds, or retreating into certain parts of the house, immediately raised alarms. As she prepared her traditional coffee, which filled the room with the warm scent of cinnamon and piloncillo, she couldn't help but notice Valeria once again outside in the yard far too early, seeking refuge with the dog instead of enjoying her breakfast. The retired teacher's instincts kicked in, and she reached for her notebook, the same one she'd used for years to jot down lesson plans and grades. Now, it served a new purpose. She recorded the time, Valeria's movements, and, most importantly, the subtle shifts in Lobo's behavior, which seemed to detect the presence of danger before it manifested. Every time Rodolfo entered the house, the dog's radar activated. Meanwhile, in the municipal office, Rodolfo, ever meticulous, was buried in budget numbers for public works, appearing calm and in control to his colleagues. His boss, Mayor Gustavo Ramirez, trusted him to handle the most delicate financial matters. "Rodolfo, I need you to review these numbers for the Vulnerable Family Support Program," the mayor instructed, placing a folder on his desk. "Make sure every penny reaches those who need it most." "Of course," Rodolfo replied, eyes still fixed on the numbers, unaware of the irony in his words. But when Rodolfo returned home at noon, the facade of the respectable public servant shattered. The same man who was praised for his professionalism and public generosity turned into someone else entirely as he stepped into the yellow house. The clock in the kitchen ticked 2:15 p.m., marking his return. The sun of March shone bright over San Rafael Tenancingo, warming the cobblestone streets while the smell of quesadillas from Doña Esperanza's corner store mingled with the distant sounds of children playing during recess. Valeria, seated in the backyard in a lotus position next to Lobo, was meticulously arranging a collection of stones she had gathered over the past few weeks, sorting them by size, color, and texture into patterns only she understood. It was her way of processing the world when things felt overwhelming. "Look, Lobo," she whispered, placing a perfectly round white stone next to a gray one with streaks. "This goes here because it's the exact shape we need. The pattern has to be complete." Lobo, always alert, kept his ears raised, his gaze fixed on the house, tracking every change in the environment. His military training, although unknown to Valeria, had taught him to detect subtle shifts in the atmosphere, sound changes, alterations in scent, or disruptions in routines that might signal danger. When the front door slammed too hard, Lobo tensed, a barely audible growl rumbling in his throat. Valeria, sensing the change, stopped her work and looked towards the house, a worried expression on her face. "Valeria, where are you?" Rodolfo's voice echoed from the kitchen, laced with an authority that made Valeria shrink instinctively. "I'm in the backyard," she answered in a near whisper, knowing she had to respond but fearing the consequences of doing so. Rodolfo's footsteps were unusually heavy as they echoed through the house, and when he appeared in the doorway, his expression, typically friendly, now twisted into one of irritation. His loosened tie and slightly disheveled hair were the only outward signs of change, but for Valeria, these were alarms she had learned to interpret with painful precision. "What are you doing lying on the floor like an animal?" he asked coldly, his steps slow and deliberate as he approached. "I've told you 1,000 times, decent girls don't get dirty playing in the dirt." Valeria scrambled to her feet, brushing the dust off her dress. Her movements were stiff, filled with anxiety, and she accidentally disrupted the stone pattern she had spent hours creating. The frustration of seeing her work undone mixed with the fear Rodolfo always instilled in her. "Sorry," she mumbled, avoiding eye contact. "I didn't realize you were home." "Of course you didn't," Rodolfo replied, his voice taking on a sarcastic tone. "You never notice anything. Your mom told me the teacher complained about your behavior again at school." This was a lie. Patricia hadn't spoken to any teacher recently, but Rodolfo had learned that fabricating these situations gave him justification for his violent outbursts. In his twisted mind, he was educating a troublesome child who needed strict discipline. Lobo, sensing the shift in tension, positioned himself between Valeria and Rodolfo, stepping forward not with aggression, but with a clear intent to protect. His military training had prepared him for moments like this. First, physical presence, then warning signals, and only as a last resort, direct action. "Get that dog out of here," Rodolfo ordered, his irritation rising. "I don't know why your mom insists on having this beast in the house. Street dogs carry diseases." "Lobo isn't a street dog," Valeria said with unexpected courage, even surprising herself. "He protects me." Her response acted as a trigger for Rodolfo, who in a swift move took 2 steps forward, his right hand instinctively rising. He had perfected the art of domestic violence, strikes that hurt but left no visible marks, pinches in hidden places, and hair pulls that appeared accidental. "He protects you?" Rodolfo repeated with venom. "You don't need an animal to protect you. What you need is to learn to behave like a normal girl." Lobo stepped closer, his body forming an impenetrable barrier between the man and the girl. A low, controlled growl vibrated in his throat, not an immediate threat but a clear warning. His golden eyes locked onto Rodolfo with such intensity that the man faltered. "That dog is growling at me," Rodolfo muttered, but there was a nervous edge to his voice that betrayed his fear. Since Lobo's arrival, Valeria had become noticeably more agitated. Rodolfo had made up his mind. He was a bad influence. Meanwhile, next door, Doña Tomasa had paused her housework to listen to the growing tension coming from the backyard. With 45 years of teaching experience, she had developed a keen ear for voices signaling conflict. She grabbed her floral notebook and noted the time, 2:30 p.m. Rodolfo had arrived in a state of agitation. Voices were sharp outside. "Come inside. Now," he ordered Valeria. "And you," he added, pointing at Lobo. "Stay outside. I don't want to see you in here until you show respect." Valeria gazed at Lobo with pleading eyes, dreading the thought of being separated from him, especially when she sensed danger. Panic set in, and her hands trembled as they began to rub her thumb against her index finger, a repetitive movement she did when her anxiety peaked. "I can't," she whispered. "Lobo's always with me. He's part of my routine." "Your routine?" Rodolfo repeated disdainfully. "Routines are for normal people, not for girls who act like they're behind." The words stung, a slap to her soul. Valeria had heard that cruel word before, from children who didn't understand her condition, but hearing it from someone who was supposed to protect her was devastating in a new way. Lobo immediately noticed the shift in Valeria's emotions. His military training had taught him how to detect anxiety and panic, skills honed through working with veterans suffering from PTSD. He sensed her heightened distress, her rapid breathing, trembling hands, and distant gaze. Without a sound, he approached Valeria, gently pressing his side against her legs, offering the deep, calming pressure she needed to stabilize her. It was a technique he'd learned to help soldiers with panic attacks, and now, instinctively, he applied it to her. "I told you to come inside," Rodolfo insisted, his patience evaporating. "And get that animal away from you." "I can't separate from Lobo," Valeria said, her voice barely audible but filled with resolve. "He understands when I'm scared." Her confession froze Rodolfo. In his arrogance, he had assumed his intimidation tactics would go unnoticed, but Valeria had found a way to speak her truth. "Scared?" Rodolfo smirked, his voice cold. "Of what? I don't do anything. I'm just trying to teach you how not to be a burden to your mother." As he spoke, his hand moved toward Valeria's arm, and Lobo reacted instantly. He positioned himself between them, not aggressively but firmly, making it clear that no contact would be allowed. His eyes locked on Rodolfo, a silent message of protection. Rodolfo's frustration reached its peak. He was used to having complete control over Valeria, and Lobo was an obstacle he hadn't anticipated. In his mind, the dog wasn't just a pet. It was a witness to his behavior, complicating his ability to act with impunity. "Fine," Rodolfo finally said, his voice dangerously calm. "If that dog means so much to you, I'll have to do something about it." The threat in his words was unmistakable, both to Valeria and Lobo. Valeria clutched Lobo's thick fur, her fingers digging in as if she could shield him with her touch. Lobo remained still but alert, his body tense, ready to act if things escalated. At that moment, the sound of a motorcycle pulling up outside interrupted the tension. It was Lupita, Patricia's friend, arriving exactly at 3 as promised. Her timing couldn't have been more perfect, though she had no idea what she had just walked into. "Patricia, I'm here," she called from the front door, her voice echoing through the house. Rodolfo shifted instantly, his respectable mask snapped back into place. His posture relaxed, and his expression softened as he walked toward the door to greet the visitor, no one suspecting the scene that had just unfolded moments before. Doña Lupita, it's a pleasure to see you, he said with the charming smile he reserved for public occasions. Patricia isn't here, but she asked me to tell you that the pills are on the table in the living room. Valeria and Lobo remained in the backyard, still trembling from the intensity of the moment. The girl wrapped her arms around the dog, whispering words of thanks which Lobo seemed to understand perfectly. Meanwhile, Doña Tomasa jotted down the time in her notebook. 3 p.m. Visitor arrived. Tense voices ceased immediately. Worrying pattern, she wrote. She finished her observations as the afternoon sun cast long shadows across her small kitchen. Her adobe home, where she had lived for 40 years, always smelled of the medicinal herbs she carefully cultivated in pots on her patio: ruda, manzanilla, hierba buena, and albahaca. Her hands, marked by years of writing on blackboards, gripped her floral notebook, now used for something very different from math and Spanish grades. March 15th, she wrote in her impeccable handwriting, the same one she had taught hundreds of children to use. Valeria has spent 3 weeks hiding in the backyard between 2 and 3:30 p.m. Lobo shows signs of agitation whenever Rodolfo is present. Today, the situation was interrupted by the arrival of Lupita. At her age, Tomasa had seen enough to recognize signs that others preferred to ignore. Throughout her career as a teacher, she had dealt with children who came to school with unexplained bruises, sudden behavioral changes, or that certain look in their eyes, the one that spoke of constant fear. She had always followed protocols, reported her suspicions to the authorities, but in a town like San Rafael Tenancingo, where social appearances meant more than the whispers of the vulnerable, she rarely saw concrete results. But this time, it would be different. She thought to herself as she prepared agua de Jamaica in a clay jar that had belonged to her mother. This time, she would make sure that little girl was protected. On the other side of the blue sky-painted block wall separating their properties, Valeria remained in the backyard, still clinging to Lobo. The German Shepherd had adopted what military trainers called passive guard, completely alert but showing no visible aggression, ready to act but without escalating unnecessarily. His golden eyes never stop watching the back door, where occasionally the silhouette of Rodolfo can be seen lurking behind the kitchen curtain. "You know what, Lobo?" Valeria whispers as she absent-mindedly braids the long fur on the dog's ears. "I think Mrs. Tomasa is watching us. I sometimes see her peeking out from her window when we're here." Lobo briefly tilts his head toward the neighbor's house, his ears twitching at the faint creak of Doña Tomasa's wicker chair scraping against the floor. His training has taught him to track every sound, every shift in the air. Potential threats, allies, escape routes, and available resources. His instinct tells him that the elderly woman, while neutral, could offer support if the need arises. From her kitchen window, Tomasa can clearly observe the body language of both the girl and the dog, picking up on details most people would miss. What disturbs Tomasa even more is the way Valeria carries herself, always on edge. Her movements are deliberate, her eyes scanning the surroundings for any sign of danger. The way she clings to Lobo makes it clear that he is her sole emotional anchor. The sound of footsteps approaching sends both Valeria and Lobo into a state of alert. Rodolfo steps into the frame of the back door, freshly changed after his visit to Lupita, his white shirt crisp and his jeans giving him the appearance of a man at ease. But Tomasa, from her vantage point, notices small details that others overlook. The tension in his shoulders, the calculated way he walks, and the smile that doesn't quite reach his eyes. "It's time for you to come inside," Rodolfo calls, his voice deceptively calm. "We need to talk about your behavior today." "My behavior?" Valeria asks, genuinely confused. "What did I do wrong?" "It's not about what you did," Rodolfo responds, his measured steps closing in. It's about what you didn't do. He pauses before adding, you didn't greet me when I arrived, didn't ask how my day went, and you allowed this dog to disrespect me. Valeria looks at Lobo, a troubled expression on her face. For her, the idea of disrespect is hard to grasp. She processes the world literally, unable to understand how Lobo's protective actions could be seen as anything but necessary. Lobo isn't disrespecting you, she says bluntly. He's just protecting me when I'm scared. The statement hits the air like a thunderclap, and Rodolfo freezes, clearly unnerved by her words. His arrogance had led him to underestimate Valeria's ability to articulate her feelings. Scared of what? He asks softly, his voice laced with menace. From her window, Tomasa watches the exchange, growing more alarmed by the moment. She's seen this before. The adult denying reality while forcing the child to conform to a false narrative. She quickly scribbles in her notebook. 3:45 p.m. Rodolfo interrogates Valeria about her fear. The typical tactic of a perpetrator denying the truth. Valeria struggles to express herself. Her mind, a precise databank of sensory experiences, struggles to find the words to explain concepts like emotional abuse or a threatening environment. Finally, she says, when you talk to me, my stomach feels weird. Lobo notices, standing firm between them. That's ridiculous. Rodolfo sneers, but his voice betrays a hint of unease. Dogs don't understand human feelings. They just react on instinct. Lobo, seemingly understanding the conversation, steps forward and positions himself squarely between Valeria and Rodolfo. His stance is calm but firm, protective without being overtly aggressive. It's a silent yet powerful demonstration that, despite what Rodolfo says, the dog understands perfectly what's happening. See what I mean? Rodolfo presses, pointing at Lobo. That dog is getting aggressive. It's dangerous to have such a beast around a little girl. Lobo isn't aggressive, Valeria protests, her voice growing stronger. He's never hurt me. He's gentle. But dogs can change in an instant, Rodolfo retorts. And when that happens, your mother and I will be responsible. I can't risk that. Tomasa, observing from her window, immediately recognizes what's happening. Rodolfo is trying to justify getting rid of Lobo, eliminating any obstacle to his control. In her years of experience, she knows that abusers always target the things or people that disrupt their power. She walks to the phone in her living room, her hands steady as she dials Esperanza Ruiz, a retired social worker. Esperanza, I need to ask you something important. If someone suspects a child is being abused, but has no direct evidence, what should they do? After a pause, Esperanza answers with immediate concern. Which child are you talking about? It's Carmen's granddaughter, Valeria. She lives with her mother and her stepfather. Something's wrong, but I need to be sure before acting. Have you seen any physical evidence? No, nothing direct. But Valeria's behavior and Rodolfo's actions are off, and there's a dog acting as though it's protecting her from constant threat. Esperanza is quiet for a moment, processing. You need to document everything. Dates, hours, specific behaviors. If possible, try to build trust with the child. Autistic children can be incredibly reliable witnesses, they just need to feel safe. Meanwhile, the conversation in the yard grows more intense. Rodolfo decides it's time to assert his control over the relationship between Valeria and Lobo. We're going to do an experiment, he says with a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. Starting tomorrow, Lobo will sleep outside. Dogs need to know their place. No, Valeria cries, the intensity of her response surprising even herself. Lobo sleeps in my room. It's part of my routine. Rodolfo's face tightens, his voice growing more authoritarian. Your routine's going to change, and if you keep acting like this, I'll have to find a new home for that dog." That night, Rodolfo's voice was sharp with rising anger. "Your routine is going to change," he declared, his tone growing harsher with each word. "And if you keep acting like a spoiled child, I'll have to consider finding a new home for that animal." The threat struck deep within Valeria. For the first time in months, a clear, burning rage bubbled up inside her, giving her the courage to speak with unexpected clarity. "You can't decide what happens to Lobo." Her voice trembled but was firm. "He's not yours. He chose me. As long as I live under your roof, eat your food, I'll decide everything that happens in this house." Rodolfo's facade of patience finally cracked, his polite smile vanishing as he snapped back. "You think that dog belongs here? It's just a stray you brought in without asking." Lobo, sensing the tension, stepped forward, his military training kicking in. Without showing any aggression, he positioned himself between Valeria and Rodolfo, alert and ready to defend if necessary. Valeria's heart raced, but she held her ground. From her window, Doña Tomasa, watching the scene unfold, felt her concern grow. She quickly jotted down the time and details. 4:15 p.m. Rodolfo threatened to get rid of Lobo, and Valeria's first instinct to defend herself had activated. The situation was escalating toward something dangerous. Suddenly, the shrill ring of the house phone interrupted the standoff. Rodolfo, visibly irritated, turned away to answer it, giving Valeria a brief, precious moment of respite. "This isn't over," he called out, his voice dark with the promise of more conflict later. "When I come back, we'll settle this once and for all." As he stepped away to take the call, Valeria collapsed, clutching Lobo to her chest, overwhelmed by the fear of losing the only source of comfort in her life. Lobo stayed motionless but ever watchful, offering her solace while maintaining a vigil over the door where the threat had emerged. The phone call that had interrupted the confrontation came from Licenciado Gustavo Ramirez, the town's mayor. He urgently needed Rodolfo to return to the office to address discrepancies in some state budget documents. This unexpected break allowed Valeria to breathe for a moment, but also marked the start of a more deliberate effort by Doña Tomasa to protect the young girl. "I have to go back to work," Rodolfo muttered, his voice tinged with irritation as he left through the back door. "But when I return, there's going to be a serious conversation about the rules of this house." The threat hung in the air, heavy and ominous. Valeria clung tighter to Lobo, who, despite the temporary reprieve, remained on high alert, understanding that the danger was only postponed, not gone. As the sound of Rodolfo's car faded into the distance, Doña Tomasa made a decision that would shift the course of events. She walked over to her wooden cabinet, where she kept the cherished mementos of her decades as an educator, and retrieved a shoebox filled with old contact numbers. "It's time to activate the network," she murmured as she began dialing. Her first call was to Refugio Castillo, known to the community as Cuquita, a retired secretary from the local DIF office who had valuable contacts in the child protection system. "Cuquita, it's Tomasa. I need to talk to you about something urgent. Can you come over now?" Cuquita's voice crackled with concern. "Is everything okay, Maestra?" Tomasa replied, "No, it's not okay, but I'd rather talk about it in person." The second call was to Soledad Herrera, a retired nurse who had witnessed far too many cases of domestic violence during her career at the Hospital General de Toluca. "Sol, it's Tomasa. Are you coming to the village this weekend?" Soledad agreed to come on Friday, and Tomasa quickly explained her worries about a young girl. The third call, the most crucial, was to Margarita Sanchez, a retired elementary IA school principal who now volunteered with children on the autism spectrum. Tomasa, speaking urgently, asked for her professional help. "There's a girl, Valeria, and I'm worried she might be facing abuse at home. Can you come to help me assess the situation?" Margarita's experience as a child psychologist gave her a sharp understanding of the gravity of the issue. "I'll be there as soon as I can," she reassured Tomasa. As Tomasa set her plan in motion, Valeria, sitting in the backyard with Lobo, did something she hadn't done before. She began to draw in a notebook, the one she usually used for her routines. The drawings were precise, revealing a hidden truth about her life with unsettling clarity. In the first picture, she drew herself beside Lobo in the backyard, but the figure of Rodolfo had exaggeratedly large hands. His face a simple yet unmistakable sign of threat. In the second drawing, Lobo stood between her and the menacing figure, lines radiating from the dog's mouth, suggesting protective growls. "Look, Lobo," Valeria whispered, as she carefully colored in the details. "This is how you protect me. You always know when I'm scared." Lobo, sensing her emotional state, moved closer to her, sniffing the drawings as though understanding their significance. His military training had included working with therapists using art to help soldiers process trauma, and though Lobo couldn't understand the drawings literally, he knew their emotional weight. Meanwhile, Cuquita arrived at Doña Tomasa's house exactly 40 minutes after the call, carrying a shopping bag as a pretext for her visit. The group of women had begun their work, each drawing closer to uncovering the full extent of Valeria's suffering and Rodolfo's dangerous grip on the family. And soon, the plan for protection would turn into a race against time as the hidden truths came to light. Tomasa, with her years of experience and a heart shaped by her time as a teacher, knew the limitations of small-town systems all too well. "Tell me everything," she urged, accepting a cup of café de olla from Tomasa, a warm aroma of cinnamon wafting between them. As she opened her floral notebook, she meticulously read through her observations. Dates, hours, specific behaviors, repetitive patterns. Cuquita listened attentively, asking precise questions that helped clarify the details. "The pattern aligns with emotional and possibly physical abuse," Cuquita concluded after reviewing the notes. "But we need more direct evidence. Neighbor testimonies and behavioral observations are important, but they aren't enough for an official intervention. What kind of evidence do we need? Physical evidence, injury photos, direct testimonies from the victim, or witnesses to specific acts of violence?" The two women strategized their next steps. Meanwhile, Patricia Morales was wrapping up her shift at the Hospital General in Toluca, unaware of the growing crisis at home. Her work routine kept her away from the house from 6 in the morning until 8 at night, which meant the most critical moments between Rodolfo and Valeria unfolded in her absence. During her mid-afternoon break, Patricia received a call from her comadre Lupita, a conversation that left her uneasy. "Hey, comadre, I went by your house today and I noticed something strange. Valeria was unusually quiet and your husband seemed nervous." "Nervous? Why?" Patricia asked, genuinely confused. "I don't know, like he was hiding something, and the girl, she was clinging to that dog as if it were her lifeline." Valeria had always been close to Lobo, but this was different, Lupita noted. It was like she was scared. The seed of doubt Lupita planted in Patricia's mind didn't sprout immediately but lingered, waiting for the right moment to grow. Patricia had been so focused on maintaining the stability Rodolfo brought into their life that she had turned a blind eye to the signs that might question that very stability. Back in San Rafael, Tenancingo, Doña Tomasa decided to take the first bold step in her plan. She approached the fence separating her property from Valeria's house and called, softly, "Valeria, cariño, can you come here for a moment?" Valeria looked up from her drawings, glanced toward Lobo as if seeking permission, and then approached slowly, her cautious steps deliberate. How are you, my dear? I've seen you out here all alone, Doña Tomasa said gently. I'm fine, Valeria replied automatically, though her body language told another story. Do you like your drawings? I used to teach art at school. If you'd like, you can come over to my house and I'll give you some new colors. The offer was tempting, but Valeria's world was so structured around specific routines that any change required careful processing. Lobo, come with me, she asked softly. Of course, said Doña Tomasa, good dogs are always welcome in my home. This simple invitation marked the beginning of what would become a safe haven for Valeria. Unknowingly, Doña Tomasa had just offered exactly what Valeria needed, a space where she and her canine protector could be accepted without question. Can I go now? Valeria asked, a timid hope in her voice. Of course, Doña Tomasa replied. Just let me open the gate. 5 minutes. Later, Valeria and Lobo were in Doña Tomasa's small garden, surrounded by pots of aromatic herbs and seasonal flowers. The house smelled of cinnamon and chamomile, and the golden light streaming through the windows made everything feel safe and welcoming. Look, Doña Tomasa said, pulling out a box of professional artist's colors she had kept from her teaching days. These are special for artists. Valeria touched the colors reverently, already imagining the possibilities. But it wasn't until she saw Lobo, settled comfortably beneath a shady orange tree, relaxed for the first time in weeks, that she realized something important. This place felt different. Doña Tomasa, Valeria asked, organizing the colors according to her personal system. Can I ask you something? Of course, Cariño. Why is Lobo so calm here? He's always alert. The question, asked with the straightforward honesty characteristic of children with autism, confirmed Doña Tomasa's suspicions. Animals, especially those with specialized training, don't stay on constant alert for no reason. Intelligent dogs like Lobo know when they're in safe places. You also feel more relaxed here, Doña Tomasa replied carefully. Valeria paused for a moment, then nodded slowly. Yes, here my stomach doesn't feel strange. The confession was exactly the confirmation Doña Tomasa needed. In her mental notebook, she marked the first successful session. Valeria confirms, constant anxiety at home. Lobo shows immediate relaxation in a safe environment. The plan was in motion. Dr. Aurelio Mendoza arrived in San Rafael Tenancingo one Thursday afternoon in early April, as the jacaranda trees were in full bloom, painting the streets a deep violet that contrasted with the golden adobe houses. At tall, his age, this retired veterinarian still stood tall, his penetrating gaze speaking to the 40 years he had dedicated to caring for animals, from livestock on remote ranches to cherished pets in urban clinics. He was visiting his younger sister, Esperanza, who had run the only pharmacy in town for the past 30 years. His plan was to enjoy a peaceful week in the village after decades of hard work in Toluca. He didn't expect to stumble upon a mystery that would make him question everything he thought he knew about fate. Aurelio, how good that you've arrived. Esperanza greeted him with a tight hug. I've missed having someone to talk to about interesting things. Around here, it's always about who got married, who died, and how much it rained. I've needed a little peace, Aurelio responded as he unloaded his suitcase. The city's wearied me. It was during his second afternoon in the village, after a hearty lunch at his sister's house, that he saw something that stopped him in his tracks. In the backyard of a yellow house, a small girl sat under a tree next to a magnificent German shepherd. As the evening sky faded into deep hues of orange and purple over the village of San Rafael Tenancingo, Dr. Mendoza found himself drawn not to the picturesque surroundings but to the dog. Slowly approaching the fence, he feigned admiration for the bougainvillea climbing along the chain link, all the while eyeing the animal with keen interest. The German Shepherd before him was a specimen of exceptional quality. Perfect bone structure, well-defined muscles, dense, gleaming coat, and, most notably, a posture and movement that screamed professional military training. "Excuse me, young lady," he called out softly, careful not to startle her. "Is that your dog?" Valeria looked up from her drawings, glancing at Lobo for a moment as if seeking his approval before answering in her usual straightforward manner. "He found me, or maybe I found him. I'm not sure." When asked how long they had been together, she answered with precise clarity, 4 months, 2 weeks, and 5 days. The doctor felt a shiver run down his spine. He took out his phone, quickly searching through his contacts until he found the number he was looking for. "Aurelio Mendoza," he said as soon as the line picked up. "I have an unusual question for you." "Go ahead," replied Roberto, his tone curious. "Do you remember the program for military dogs trained to help veterans with PTSD? Did we lose any dogs during a transport last year?" A long pause ensued on the other end of the line, and when Roberto answered, his voice was tense. "Why are you asking about that?" "Because," Dr. Mendoza said, a heavy realization settling over him, "I think I've found Kaiser." The dog, whom Valeria knew only as Lobo, had once been a part of the elite military program, trained for over 18 months in Puebla to assist soldiers with PTSD, anxiety, and panic attacks. His skills included interrupting nightmares, applying deep pressure during anxiety episodes, detecting emotional changes, and, crucially, identifying and protecting vulnerable individuals. Kaiser disappeared during a routine transfer in February of last year, explained Roberto. The vehicle carrying 5 dogs from the program had an accident near the Mexico-Toluca highway. 3 dogs were recovered, but Kaiser vanished without a trace. We searched for weeks. Where exactly did the accident happen? At kilometer 47 near San Rafael, Tenancingo, Dr. Mendoza answered. The truck overturned due to mechanical failure. Kaiser took advantage of the chaos to escape, but instead of heading back to the military facility, he made his way into the village. Dr. Mendoza processed this new information as he pieced together Valeria's timeline. She had found Lobo 2 days after the accident, in her backyard, exactly 12 kilometers from the crash site, a distance a trained dog could easily cover in 2 days. "Roberto, I need to ask you something specific," Dr. Mendoza pressed. "Was Kaiser trained to detect signs of domestic abuse or violence?" "Yes, it was. Part of the advanced program," Roberto replied. "Many of the veterans we worked with had endured extreme violence, and Kaiser was specifically trained to recognize trauma, detect escalations in violence, and provide protective intervention. This also included protecting individuals outside, his handler's direct supervision." Dr. Mendoza hung up, now fully understanding the situation. Lobo hadn't wandered into Valeria's life by chance. His military training had directed him to her, recognizing her as a vulnerable child in need of protection. The retired veterinarian made his way to Doña Tomasa's house, where she had become the center of a growing protective network for Valeria. "Excuse the interruption," Dr. Mendoza began as he greeted Doña Tomasa. "I'm Dr. Aurelio Mendoza, the brother of Esperanza from the pharmacy. I understand you know the young girl in the yellow house. I need to talk to you about her dog." Doña Tomasa invited him in, and for the next 40 minutes Dr. Mendoza explained everything. Lobo was not just a protective pet, but a trained professional. His presence in Valeria's life confirmed what Tomasa had long suspected. The girl was in danger. "Are you saying this dog was specifically trained to detect and protect victims of violence?" Tomasa asked, trying to grasp the gravity of the situation. "Exactly," Dr. Mendoza affirmed. and the fact that he chose to stay with Valeria, developed specific protective behaviors toward her, and shows constant alertness when her stepfather is near all point to one thing: Lobo is detecting a real threat. Tomasa felt the weight of this revelation. If Lobo was acting according to his military training, then they had concrete evidence that Valeria was in imminent danger. The retired teacher knew that military-trained dogs like Kaiser were recognized as credible witnesses in court, and this was more than enough to begin taking action. "I'm willing to testify about Kaiser's training if necessary," Dr. Mendoza continued. "But there's more. The military program has protocols for cases like this. If Kaiser has bonded with a vulnerable person and is actively providing protection, the program doesn't just support his presence, it can provide additional resources." Tomasa took this in and began updating her notes. She realized the full implications of what she had been observing. Lobo was not just an animal in Valeria's life. He was a professional, trained for precisely this kind of situation. Meanwhile, at the Yellow House, Rodolfo was eating dinner with Patricia when she casually mentioned a conversation she had with her friend Lupita. "Do you know what Lupita said the other day? She noticed Valeria was nervous when she went to pick up my mother's pills." Rodolfo didn't react immediately, but something in his demeanor shifted. Rodolfo's voice was flat, his eyes still glued to his plate as he responded, "Autistic children are always nervous. It's nothing new." Patricia, puzzled by the mention of his tension, asked, "But Lupita said you seemed tense. Did something happen that day?" He lifted his gaze with a look that Patricia couldn't fully interpret, but it unsettled her, sending a chill through her. "Nothing happened," Rodolfo replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Your friend has a vivid imagination. Maybe she's reading into things that aren't there. She should mind her own business." His sharp tone was unusual, and Patricia felt a crack in the perfect life she had thought she built with him. A tiny fissure, almost unnoticeable, but one that would, in time, let the light in. Outside in the backyard, Valeria sat next to Lobo, under the soft light spilling through the kitchen window. She was drawing scenes from her day spent at Doña Tomasa's house, a place where, for the first time in months, she felt completely safe. "You know, Lobo," she whispered while stroking his fur, "Doña Tomasa's house smells like flowers. There you don't always have to be protecting me. There, we can both rest." Lobo, who we now knew as Kaiser, wagged his tail gently. His training allowed him to recognize when his charge had found a truly safe space, and Doña Tomasa's home qualified. But he also knew that the main danger had not disappeared, just been postponed. In his trained mind, he was constantly calculating escape routes, available resources, potential allies, and immediate threats. For the first time since arriving to protect this vulnerable girl, he was starting to identify elements that could tip the balance toward permanent safety rather than temporary protection. The support network Doña Tomasa was building, the documentation she was gathering, and now the professional confirmation that her instincts were correct, were creating the conditions for Kaiser to complete his mission. Not just to protect Valeria from immediate threats, but to help eliminate them altogether. On a warm Friday afternoon, as the streets of San Rafael Tenancingo shimmered in the April heat, and the scent of freshly made tortillas mingled with the perfume of blooming orange trees, Valeria did something extraordinary. For the first time since Lobo had come into her life, she walked voluntarily toward Doña Tomasa's house without needing an invitation, carrying a folder she had carefully decorated with golden stars and colorful flowers. "Doña Tomasa," she said softly as the elderly woman opened the door, "I have my special drawings. They're different from the others." Doña Tomasa, who had been waiting for this moment ever since Dr. Mendoza had explained the professional nature of Lobo's protective skills, invited the child inside with a mixture of anticipation and concern. She knew that what she was about to see could be the evidence she had been waiting for, but also she understood that it would be painful to witness Valeria's reality captured on paper. The folder contained 17 drawings, each meticulously executed, as is often the case with children on the autism spectrum. Each one was dated in the careful handwriting Valeria had developed, and together, they formed a visual chronology of the last 4 months of her life. What Doña Tomasa saw left her breathless. The first drawing, dated February 15th, marked Bad Day, depicted a yellow house from the inside. A small figure with braids crouched in a corner, while a large male figure loomed over her, hands disproportionately large. The colors were dark, grays, browns, blacks, except for the blue tears falling from the girl's eyes. This was the day before Lobo came, Valeria explained, her voice flat as she recounted the events with the objectivity typical of children with autism. Rodolfo told me I was a problem child and that I had to learn to be normal. The second drawing, dated February 17th, marked Good Day. It showed the same house, but now there was a 4-legged figure in the yard. The colors were brighter, and the girl was smiling. This was Lobo's first appearance in Valeria's art, marking the beginning of a noticeable change in the emotional tone of the drawings. This is when I found him, or when he found me. I was in the yard when I woke up as if he'd been waiting for me. Doña Tomasa examined each drawing with the attention of a detective and the sensitivity of a teacher. The third drawing, dated February 20th, showed Lobo positioned between Valeria and Rodolfo. The girl had drawn lines coming from the dog's mouth, indicating growls or barks of warning. "What happened that day?" asked Doña Tomasa gently. "Rodolfo wanted me to put my toys in a box because he said girls my age don't play with baby toys. But those toys help me when I feel nervous. Lobo stood between us and wouldn't let him come near my things." The fourth drawing, dated February 28th, was particularly revealing. It depicted Rodolfo with a facial expression that, though simplified by Valeria's style, clearly conveyed anger. His hands were drawn touching the arm of the figure representing Valeria, with red marks on that arm. Lobo appeared with his teeth visible in an attack position. "That day Rodolfo grabbed my arm really hard because I wouldn't eat all the food on my plate," Valeria explained, unconsciously rubbing her left arm. "I got purple bruises. Lobo got really mad and barked at him until he let go." Doña Tomasa felt her heart race. This drawing was direct evidence of physical violence documented by the victim herself, with specific dates and precise details. As an educator, she knew that children with autism rarely fabricate stories. Their literal minds process and reproduce events exactly as they perceived them. The subsequent drawings showed a gradual escalation in tension. In each, Rodolfo became progressively more menacing, while Lobo grew more prominent and protective. The dates perfectly aligned with the observations Doña Tomasa had been documenting in her own notebook. Drawing number 12, dated March 15th, was particularly striking. It depicted Rodolfo holding an object that looked like a belt, while Valeria was in a defensive position, and Lobo stood between them, clearly in an aggressive stance. "What happened that day?" asked Doña Tomasa softly. Rodolfo said he was going to teach me to behave with the belt, like they taught him when he was a kid, but Lobo wouldn't let him get close. He got really mad and Rodolfo went to his room shouting. "Was your mom home?" "No. Mom's never home when these things happen. Rodolfo always waits until she's at work." This last comment confirmed what Doña Tomasa had suspected. The violence was carefully calculated to happen only when Patricia was absent, explaining why the mother hadn't noticed the signs of abuse. ChatGPT Janoi. The last 5 drawings show a new shift in the situation. Drawn between March 20th and 30, These depict scenes where Rodolfo no longer tries to physically approach Valeria, but his presence still lingers like a dark cloud. In these pictures, Lobo stands watch, ever alert, while a new figure appears, a kind older woman watching from a window. "That's you," Valeria points out, her small finger tracing the figure. "You're always watching us." At first she thought the woman disliked them, her and Lobo, but then she realized something important. She was watching over them. "How did you know?" Tomasa asks. "Because when you're in your window," Lobo relaxes, Valeria responds, her gaze steady and sure. "It's like he knows you're helping him protect me." Valeria's insight is startlingly accurate. Unknowingly, she has pinpointed the growing network of protection forming around her, and her drawings provide visual evidence of how the power dynamics in her home have begun to shift. The final drawing, dated April 2nd, stands apart from the rest. It shows two houses, one yellow, one blue. In the yellow house, the figures are separated by dark lines, while in the blue house, Valeria and Lobo sit together under a bright sun, surrounded by flowers. "The blue house is ours," she explains softly, her eyes meeting Tomasa's. "There, Lobo and I can be safe. Right, we won't have to be scared anymore." Tomasa nods, her voice firm, surprising even herself. "My house will always be a safe place, for you two." As Valeria carefully packs her drawings away in their folder, Tomasa feels the weight of what she's just witnessed. In her hands, she holds a visual record of months of systematic abuse, created by the victim herself with precise dates and specific details. More importantly, she now has clear evidence that Lobo, the dog she thought was just a protector, has been an active force in preventing further violence. "Valeria, these drawings are incredibly important," Tomasa says, her tone serious. "Would you be willing to show them to people who can help you?" Valeria thinks deeply, her expression thoughtful. "Who are these people?" she asks. "People who specialize in protecting children like you. People who can make sure you'll never have to be afraid in your own home again." Valeria looks at Lobo, who has remained close, and then back at Tomasa. "Lobo can stay with me if I talk to them?" she asks, her voice small but certain. "Lobo will always stay with you," Tomasa reassures her, her voice gentle but strong. "He's your protector, and no one will separate you two." Later that evening, as Valeria eats dinner with her mother and Rodolfo, Tomasa makes a series of crucial phone calls. The first is to Dr. Mendoza, the second to Kukita, and the third to Margarita, the autism specialist. "We have the evidence we need," she tells each of them. "Valeria has documented everything in her drawings. It's time to act." The most important call is to Esperanza Ruiz, the retired social worker. Tomasa explains everything, the discovery about Lobo's military training and the evidence Valeria has provided. Esperanza listens closely, then responds, "This is enough for a formal intervention. But we need to move fast. If Rodolfo suspects we're investigating, he might try to leave, or worse, get rid of the dog who's Valeria's primary protection. The plan is set." The next day, Tomasa will visit with a colleague still working in social services, and they'll conduct a preliminary assessment. "We have to make it seem casual," Esperanza advises. "A visit among friends, just a conversation. We can't tip him off until we're ready." Meanwhile, in the yellow house, a scene unfolds that none of them anticipated. Patricia, growing increasingly aware of the small inconsistencies in Rodolfo's version of reality, decides to take action, something she hasn't done in months. She arrives home early, an hour and a half before her usual time. As she quietly turns the key in the lock, she has no idea that what she's about to discover will shatter her perception of everything she thought was true. The sound of the key turning in the lock cuts through the silence like a knife. Patricia had arranged to leave early from the hospital, inventing an urgent medical appointment after the conversation with her friend Lupita echoed in her mind. The small details she had ignored in the past days were now forming a pattern she couldn't deny. The sudden silences when she came home, the way Valeria tensed when Rodolfo entered her room, the subtle changes in her daughter's routine that she could no longer explain away as part of the autism. Voices drift from the back patio, and Patricia silently moves toward them, her feet barely touching the cold tiles. Through the translucent kitchen curtain, she sees something that stops her dead in her tracks. Rodolfo stands over Valeria, who is huddled against the patio wall, arms wrapped around her head. Lobo is positioned between them, fur bristling, emitting a deep growl she's never heard before. "I told you to be quiet." Rodolfo's voice is cold, unrecognizable to Patricia. Normal girls don't make this much noise. "I wasn't making noise," Valeria whispers. "I was just telling Lobo about my drawings." "Talking to yourself like a crazy person is making noise," Rodolfo sneers, his words sharp with disdain. "And that dog's getting in the way with all his ridiculous protection." Patricia freezes as Rodolfo steps forward. Lobo immediately steps in, his muscles tense, ready to spring. It's then that Patricia realizes this isn't the first time this scene is played out. The movements of everyone involved are too rehearsed, too automatic. It's a routine. "Get that dog out of here," Rodolfo orders, his patience snapping. "I'm tired of a street dog challenging me in my own house." "Lobo's not a street dog," Valeria says, her voice trembling but determined. "And this isn't your house. It's my mom's and mine." The words hit like a lightning bolt. Rodolfo steps closer, hand rising to strike. Patricia's heart races as she watches the calculated motion, the years of repeated violence, the premeditated blow. But before it connects, Lobo launches forward, a bark that reverberates through the air. He doesn't attack. His training kicks in. He knows exactly how to neutralize the threat without causing harm, using his body weight to knock Rodolfo off balance. Rodolfo stumbles backward, cursing. Patricia sees everything clearly now. The patterns she ignored, the small signs, have finally broken through. She's paralyzed for just a moment, but then her instincts kick in. "Get out of my house," she says, her voice a calm fury. "You're not welcome here anymore." Rodolfo stands frozen. The image of his power is crumbling piece by piece, but he still tries to hold on. "This is my house too," he spits out, his arrogance slowly dissipating. "No," Patricia retorts. "It's mine, and I'm taking it back." The tension in the air was thick, heavy with the weight of unspoken truths. Rodolfo, in his usual calculated manner, pushed forward, but Lobo reacted swiftly. With a controlled maneuver, he shoved Rodolfo back, breaking his stance and forcing him to retreat from Valeria. It was a move so precise it showed years of military training. Rodolfo stumbled, his anger flaring. "Enough of your nonsense," he yelled, his voice full of venom. That's when Patricia burst through the door, stepping into the chaos. The change in the room was instant. Rodolfo straightened, adopting the posture of the innocent man caught in a web of misunderstanding. Valeria, eyes full of tears, rushed to her mother, and Lobo positioned himself between them, his protective gaze, never leaving Rodolfo. Patricia's voice trembled as she asked, "What's going on here?" Her heart already knew the answer, but she needed to hear it. "Nothing, love," Rodolfo replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Just telling Valeria she needs to control her dog. He's becoming aggressive." Valeria shouted, her voice thick with emotion. "Lobo is not aggressive. He was protecting me." The question hung in the air, and Patricia's gaze locked onto Rodolfo's, now filled with silent fury. Rodolfo, sensing the shift in power, tried to downplay the situation. "Autistic children have episodes," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "They misinterpret things. Lobo is just reacting to her imagination." But Patricia wasn't listening anymore. Her eyes were on Valeria, her body language signaling the truth she had ignored for so long. "Valeria, come here," Patricia said, her voice soft but firm as she extended her arms. "Tell me exactly what happened." Rodolfo tried to interject. It's not good to feed her fantasies. But Patricia silenced him, her tone sharp. "I asked my daughter, not you." Valeria, still unsure, looked from her mother to Rodolfo, then to Lobo, silently weighing the situation. And then, with unexpected clarity, she spoke. "Rodolfo was going to hit me because I told him this wasn't his house." Lobo stopped him. "He never lets me get hurt. He never lets you hurt me." The words hit like a thunderclap, shattering the quiet facade Patricia had been clinging to. Rodolfo's defense faltered. He tried to manipulate the situation again. "Patricia, you can't base your decisions on the fantasies of a troubled child." His words were full of contempt, but Patricia's resolve grew. She took a step closer, her voice steady. "You mean the life where I work 12 hours a day while you terrorize my daughter?" Rodolfo, caught off guard, stammered. "I've never terrorized her. I'm just giving her structure." "Structure?" Patricia's voice was laced with disgust. "You call threatening her with violence structure? You've never touched her, but you were going to." The confrontation had escalated, and for the first time Rodolfo couldn't spin his lies. The truth stood naked before them all. Patricia's anger reached its peak. "Get out of my house now," she shouted, the fury of a mother who had long suppressed her instincts. Rodolfo's response was dripping with cruelty. "You're going to choose a troubled child over the man who gave you stability?" The insult against Valeria was the last straw. Patricia pushed him, hard, sending him stumbling back. "Never speak about my daughter that way again," she shouted. "This is my house, not yours. Get out before I call the police." Rodolfo sneered, his smugness faltering. "Call the police? What will you say? That a respectable man is disciplining a troublesome child? Who do you think they'll believe?" Patricia stood her ground, unwavering. "I don't care what anyone thinks. My responsibility is to protect my daughter." The words were final, leaving no room for doubt. Lobo, sensing the shift in power, stood even taller, his stance firm and unyielding. It was as if he knew the threat had been neutralized, and now it was his turn to stand watch over his family. The confrontation marked a turning point. Patricia's voice, once uncertain, now carried the weight of undeniable truth. With Rodolfo's power slipping away, it was the community's turn to act. Down the street, Doña Tomasa had been listening, and as the fight unfolded, she was already calling for backup, setting in motion a network of support that Rodolfo had never anticipated. The battle for Valeria's safety was just beginning. The key. Tension inside the yellow house reaches its peak as the clock strikes 7:15 p.m. Doña Tomasa, preparing her modest dinner of quesadillas and café de olla, hears Patricia's voice rise in a way she's never heard before. It's followed by the cold, threatening response of Rodolfo. Without hesitation, she picks up the phone in her living room and dials the first number on her emergency list. "Cuquita, it's Tomasa." The situation's exploded. Patricia's figured it out, and they're confronting each other right now. "We need to activate the plan immediately." "Are you sure it's the right time? The man is threatening to use his social standing to silence her. If we don't act now, he might convince Patricia to stay quiet. Or worse, he could hurt the girl out of vengeance," Cuquita replies, her voice thick with concern. Tomasa listens, then hangs up, immediately calling Esperanza Ruiz, the retired social worker who had planned to visit Saturday but now must come sooner due to the urgency. Esperanza, we need you here tonight. This can't wait. What's the severity of it? Is he threatening the mother with his reputation to discredit any report? It's the classic pattern of intimidation from someone with status in the community. I'll be there in 2 hours, Esperanza says, urgency clear in her tone. Meanwhile, back at the yellow house, the confrontation has reached a boiling point. Patricia stands in the doorway, Valeria clutching her waist and Lobo positioned between them and Rodolfo, a silent yet powerful barrier. Rodolfo, his mask of respectability long gone, confronts Patricia with a chilling grin. You know what happens if you make a scene out of this? Rodolfo sneers. I work at the municipal presidency. I know the president, the municipal attorney, the head of public safety. My word weighs more than that of a nurse with a problematic child. Patricia's heart pounds as she hears the ugly words spill from his mouth. She knows how much reputation means in a small town like theirs. But as she looks down at her daughter's frightened face, something inside her shifts. She cannot let fear dictate her actions. I don't care what people think anymore, Patricia says, her voice firm, surprising even herself. My responsibility is to protect my daughter. Your responsibility is to keep this family together. Think about what you stand to lose. Economic stability, social respectability, a safe future for the two of us. You're about to throw it all away for the whims of a child who can't even function normally. The words hit like a thunderclap, awakening something primal within Patricia, the fierce protective love of a mother. Her fury bursts free like a volcano. Get out of my house. Now, she yells, her voice shaking with raw emotion. Lobo steps forward, sensing the shift in the power dynamic. I'm not leaving my house, Rodolfo says, crossing his arms, his arrogance bleeding through. If you want me gone, call the police and I'll tell them exactly what kind of mother you are. Patricia's resolve hardens as she looks at her daughter's face, the vulnerability and terror that have haunted her for so long. I'm not going to let you threaten me anymore, she says. Just then, Valeria, her small voice trembling, calls out from behind her mother. Mom, Doña Tomasa is coming. Indeed, Tomasa appears at the front door, walking with the calm authority that only years of teaching children could provide. With her is Cuquita, and a younger woman who Patricia doesn't recognize. It's Margarita Sanchez, a psychologist specializing in autism, who arrived in town as soon as she received the emergency call. Patricia, I'm Tomasa, your neighbor, the elderly woman says, her voice calm but firm. These are my friends, Refugio and Margarita. We've come because we're worried about Valeria. Worried about what? Rodolfo asks, his grin forced, momentarily thrown off by the unexpected interruption. Tomasa's gaze locks onto his, her expression one of authority, honed through decades of educating children. Mr. Vasquez, for the last 4 months I've been documenting concerning situations in this house. I think it's time we all talked as responsible adults. Rodolfo scoffs, but his voice no longer carries the same commanding tone. I have nothing to say to you. Perhaps not to me, Tomasa says, pulling out her notebook, but to the proper authorities. I have detailed records of behavior patterns, suggesting child abuse. The word abuse hangs in the air like a verdict. Rodolfo's confident facade cracks and he realizes his manipulation has lost its hold. Margarita, with the expertise of years of dealing with trauma, kneels beside Valeria, who is still holding tightly to her mother. Hi, Valeria, she says, gently. I'm Margarita. I work with children like you. Can we talk? Valeria looks at Lobo, who moves to sit calmly beside Margarita, signaling safety to the girl. Do you know children like me? Valeria asks, her voice a mix of curiosity and honesty. Yes, I do, Margarita replies, her voice warm and understanding. Children like you are some of the smartest and most honest people I know. Just like that, the dynamic shifts. Patricia begins to see a flicker of hope for her daughter. As the sun set over San Rafael Tenancingo, painting the sky with colors that Valeria now uses in her drawings, pinks, oranges, and golds, the peaceful ambiance of her sky-blue house resonated with the sounds that had been absent for months. Genuine laughter, relaxed conversations, and the deep tranquility of knowing they were truly safe. Patricia stood by the kitchen window, watching her daughter and the dog who had saved her life. They were planning their next project, a book of drawings to help other children identify signs of danger and learn how to ask for help. It was the perfect culmination of a story that began in fear and silence but ended in courage and voice. In her new notebook, Valeria wrote with the meticulous handwriting she had perfected through months of practice. Day 1 of our new mission. Lobo and I are going to help ensure no child ever has to be alone with fear, because everyone deserves a guardian. Whether it's a special dog, a neighbor who watches over them, or a mom who finally listens, Valeria and Lobo's story had become a local legend. But more importantly, it had become a living story that continued to inspire positive change every day. The village that once protected appearances above truth now protected its most vulnerable with the fierceness of a united family. And under the peach tree, as the stars began to appear in the clear October sky, a girl who once lived in silence and fear was now planning aloud a future full of possibilities, protected by a guardian who had found his true purpose and surrounded by a community that had learned that true strength comes from protecting those who need it most. Doña Tomasa stood in the modest living room, her eyes fixed on Dr. Aurelio Mendoza, the retired veterinarian who had been called in to give his professional opinion about the dog Lobo. His presence added a crucial layer to the investigation. Doctora Herrera, Tomasa began, this is Dr. Aurelio Mendoza. He has vital information about Lobo that could be important for the evaluation. Isabel, curious, leaned forward. What kind of information? Dr. Mendoza adjusted his glasses, his voice steady. Lobo is no ordinary dog, he said, his words carrying weight. He's been specially trained for military operations, including detecting and responding to domestic violence. His protective behavior toward Valeria isn't instinctive. It's a professional response to real threats. The revelation completely shifted the perspective of the investigation. Isabel scribbled notes while Rodolfo's face drained of color. His strategy to discredit Valeria's testimony was falling apart. So, you're telling me that this dog was trained to detect domestic abuse? Isabel asked, her voice almost a whisper. Exactly, Dr. Mendoza replied. His military name was Kaiser, and he was part of a therapeutic program for veterans with trauma. His training includes techniques to identify vulnerable people and protect them from threats. The weight of the statement hit Rodolfo like a ton of bricks. His smirk faltered as he realized his manipulation had failed. Valeria, sitting quietly nearby, looked at Lobo with a new understanding. So Lobo is like a special police officer who came to protect me? She asked, her voice quiet, but filled with awe. Dr. Mendoza nodded. Yes, exactly. He came to protect you because his training told him you needed it. Isabel continued taking notes, her eyes flickering between Valeria and the dog, as Valeria pulled out more of her drawings. These sketches were filled with specific, detailed events, incidents of abuse. The ones from February 28th and March 15th were particularly revealing, showing times when Rodolfo had tried to use physical violence, only to be stopped by Lobo's intervention. Valeria, Isabel said softly, these drawings show that Rodolfo tried to hurt you, Can you tell me exactly what happened on those days? Valeria pointed to her arm. On February 28th, he grabbed my arm so hard because I didn't want to eat all my food. I got purple bruises here, she explained. And on March 15th, he was going to hit me with his belt because I told him this wasn't his house, but Lobo got really mad and scared him away. Has he ever hit you? Isabel asked gently. No, not with his hands or anything, but he pushes me, grabs me really hard, and always tells me that I'm a problem and that Mom would be better off without me, Valeria said, her voice steady. Patricia, who had been listening quietly, finally snapped. You told my daughter that? You told her you'd be better off without her? She demanded, her voice trembling with fury. Calm down, Patricia. Rodolfo tried to recover his composure, his tone defensive. Children misinterpret things. I was just trying to motivate her to behave better. That's not motivation, Patricia shot back, her voice cracking. Telling a child that their mother would be better off without them is emotional abuse. Isabel continued to document the exchange, noting not just the words spoken but also the emotional reactions of each participant. Patterns were emerging. Valeria's testimony was detailed, consistent, and incredibly precise. Meanwhile, Rodolfo was shifting between denial, minimization, and justification. Senor Vasquez, Isabel said firmly, you'll need to answer to specific allegations of physical and emotional abuse. These include physical contact that resulted in injuries, threats with objects, and systematic psychological abuse. That's an exaggeration, Rodolfo muttered. She's just a girl who can't tell the difference between normal discipline and abuse. Margarita, who had been silent until now, intervened. Children with autism are particularly reliable witnesses. They process information literally and in great detail, she said, her tone calm but unwavering. Their testimonies tend to be more accurate than those of neurotypical children. At that moment, Cuquita, who had been quietly observing, pulled out a folder. Dr. Herrera, we also have information about Senor Vasquez's past that could be relevant. Isabel raised an eyebrow. What kind of information? Cuquita began to speak, her voice low but certain. Through contacts in other municipalities, we learned that Senor Vasquez was transferred from his previous job in Tecamacuncia due to inappropriate behavior toward minors. The complaint didn't go anywhere, but it led to his relocation. The bombshell hit the room. Rodolfo's face turned ashen as he shot up from his chair, completely undone. That's slander, he shouted, his voice shaking with rage. That transfer was because of a reorganization. We have copies of the official documents, Cuquita said calmly. The reorganization happened 2 weeks after a mother reported inappropriate behavior toward her 7-year-old son. Isabel began scribbling furiously as she processed the information. The pattern was clear. Multiple locations, similar age victims. This was no isolated incident. This was a systemic behavior. Senor Vasquez, Isabel said coldly, you will need legal counsel. These accusations, combined with your past history, form a pattern of behavior that requires formal criminal investigation. Rodolfo was at a loss for words. This is a conspiracy, he growled. A group of resentful women trying to ruin a successful man. Tomasa, who had been silent up until now, stood up and spoke with the authority of a seasoned educator. A successful man doesn't terrorize children to feel powerful. A successful man protects the vulnerable, he doesn't attack them. The statement hit Rodolfo like a physical blow. His reputation was shattered. His social standing was compromised. And the evidence against him was overwhelming. The network of protection that the women of the town had built around Valeria had become an inescapable trap for him. Lobo, sensing that the main threat was being neutralized, finally relaxed for the first time in months. His mission to protect Valeria was nearing its completion, and the human professionals who had once been passive observers could now take control of the situation. The truth had come to light, and with it, the real possibility that Valeria could live without fear for the first time in nearly a year. 6 months after that fateful night, the town of San Rafael, Tenancingo, woke up to the familiar scent of freshly made coffee and tortillas. But something had changed. It was the first week of October, and the rains had washed away the summer dust. The bougainvilleas bloomed in vibrant colors, casting dancing shadows on the adobe walls. In the house on Hidalgo Street, now painted a peaceful sky blue that Valeria had chosen because it reminded her of calm days, an entirely new routine replaced the tense silence that had characterized the past months. Valeria, now 9, no longer woke up at 6:30 in the morning due to anxiety, but with excitement. Her room, once a refuge for survival, had transformed into a space where she could grow, learn, and be free from fear. In the vibrant town of San Rafael, Tenancingo, Valeria's mornings have transformed from fear to routine and joy. Her room, once a place of silence, now bursts with color, her drawings showcasing scenes of peace. Her and Lobo playing in the yard, visiting Doña Tomasa, joining community activities. Gone are the dark, fearful images of the past, replaced by bright hues of happiness. Every morning Valeria greets Lobo, the faithful German shepherd who now shares her world. "Good morning, Lobo," she says, brushing his fur as he rests peacefully beside her. The bond between them is undeniable. Lobo, once her protector, now a constant companion. Patricia enters the room with a cup of hot chocolate, prepared just the way Valeria likes it, with a dash of cinnamon and a touch of vanilla. The warmth of the drink mirrors the transformation in their lives. No longer the overworked mother retreating from problems she didn't want to see, Patricia has become the fiercely protective, present mother Valeria always needed. "Are you ready for school, my love?" Patricia asks, sitting on the edge of the bed. Valeria nods with excitement. "Yes, Mom. Today we're presenting our projects on special animals. I did mine on military service dogs. Lobo, now known by his official name Kaiser, will be there too, accompanying Valeria to her school presentation. Valeria's project on military dogs has become a sensation at Benito Juarez Primary School, aided by Dr. Aurelio Mendoza, a guest expert. The presentation educates her classmates not just on the capabilities of these dogs but also on understanding the special needs of children with autism. Valeria's classmates are captivated, and for the first time Valeria feels understood and supported. Her presentation, with Lobo by her side, is a milestone, signaling not only her growth, but also a shift in the school's policy. Following the events that led to Rodolfo's removal, the school has implemented new protocols to support students with special needs, including the presence of emotional support animals when needed. As Valeria walks to school, proudly wearing her backpack, decorated with patches celebrating her neurodiversity, she shares her excitement with Lobo. "I'm going to tell everyone how you came into my life just when I needed you most," she says, a newfound confidence in her voice. The town, which once saw her as the troubled child, now recognizes her as a survivor, someone who has turned her trauma into strength. Valeria no longer hides in the shadows but stands tall, embraced by a community that has learned to value her. Back at home, Patricia marvels at how far they've come. The truth about Rodolfo, once hidden, has come to light through the tireless work of Doña Tomasa and the community. The network of women who rallied to protect Valeria has grown into a formal program, now adopted by other municipalities. The transformation of Valeria's story has become a beacon of hope, not just for her, but for other children facing similar battles. At school, Valeria confidently presents her project, explaining how Lobo's training helps him detect danger and protect those in need. Lobo didn't come to my house by accident, she says clearly, her voice strong. He came because his training told him I needed help. He can sense things that humans can't. The students are captivated by her maturity and insight, recognizing the strength in her words. Lobo is trained to protect those who cannot protect themselves, Valeria continues, her simple but profound explanation educating her peers on the true power of these dogs. As they walk home, Patricia is filled with pride. Valeria's confidence has returned, and it's not just a result of surviving. It's the courage to thrive despite the horrors she endured. I'm so proud of you, Patricia says, as Valeria chatters away about her day. Their lives have changed, forever, and now, together, they continue to heal, supported by Lobo, the community, and the strength of their bond. Patricia le dijo, no es solo que hayas sobrevivido a algo tan doloroso, sino que ahora usas esa experiencia para ayudar a otros, como la señora Tomasa hizo conmigo, exactamente como ella lo hizo contigo. Por la tarde, en la casa azul cielo de doña Tomasa, hornear galletas se ha convertido en una tradición sagrada. Valeria tiene su propio espacio con utensilios, adaptados a su tamaño, mientras que Lobo se acomoda bajo el árbol de naranjo, vigilando todo desde su lugar preferido, disfrutando de la frescura de la sombra. Señora Tomasa, dice Valeria mientras mezcla la masa con una concentración profunda. ¿Cree que hay otros niños que necesiten ayuda como yo la necesité? Estoy segura de que sí, mi niña, responde Tomasa. Por eso es tan importante que compartas tu historia, para que otros niños sepan que pueden pedir ayuda y que hay adultos dispuestos a escucharlos. Y para que sepan que los perros especiales, como Lobo, existen. Que la ayuda puede venir de muchas formas diferentes y que nunca estarán solos. Mientras hornean, Tomasa reflexiona sobre cómo un caso de maltrato infantil se ha convertido en una historia de esperanza, una que ha fortalecido a toda la comunidad. Su programa de vigilancia comunitaria ha identificado y ayudado a 3 familias más, y el modelo está siendo estudiado por universidades que investigan la prevención de la violencia doméstica en comunidades rurales. Al atardecer, cuando las campanas de la iglesia de San Rafael Arcángel marcan las 6 de la tarde, y el aire se llena con el aroma de las cenas preparándose en cada hogar, Valeria y Lobo regresan a su casa azul cielo, cargados de galletas recién hechas y nuevas lecciones de vida. En el patio trasero, transformado ahora en un jardín próspero lleno de flores que Valeria escogió por sus colores brillantes, se sientan bajo el árbol de durazno donde comenzó su amistad. Valeria toma su cuaderno nuevo, uno con páginas en blanco que representan posibilidades futuras, en lugar de los traumas del pasado. ¿Sabes qué, Lobo?, le dice mientras empieza a dibujar. Creo que tu misión no ha terminado. Ahora somos un equipo que ayuda a otros niños como yo. Lobo mueve la cola, su entrenamiento militar confirmándole que su propósito ha cambiado, de ser un protector individual, aparte de un sistema de apoyo comunitario. La niña vulnerable que llegó a proteger se ha convertido en una defensora fuerte, capaz de inspirar cambios positivos en los demás. Mientras el sol se pone sobre San Rafael Tenancingo, pintando el cielo con los mismos colores que Valeria usa, ahora en sus dibujos, rosas, naranjas y dorados, la casa azul cielo resuena con sonidos que llevaban meses sin escucharse, risas genuinas, conversaciones relajadas, y la tranquilidad profunda que solo se obtiene cuando finalmente te sientes verdaderamente seguro. Patricia observa desde la ventana de la cocina, mientras su hija y el perro que la salvó planifican su próximo proyecto. un libro de dibujos para ayudar a otros niños a identificar señales de peligro y saber cómo pedir ayuda. Es la culminación perfecta de una historia que comenzó con miedo y silencio, pero que terminó con valentía y voz. En su cuaderno nuevo, Valeria escribe con la caligrafía que ha perfeccionado durante meses de práctica. Día 1 de nuestra nueva misión. Lobo y yo vamos a ayudar a que ningún niño tenga que estar solo con el miedo, porque todos merecen tener un guardián, ya sea un perro especial, una vecina que observa, o una mamá que finalmente escucha. La historia de Valeria y Lobo se ha convertido en una leyenda local, pero más importante aún, se ha convertido en una historia viviente que continúa inspirando cambios positivos cada día. El pueblo que antes protegía las apariencias por encima de la verdad ahora protege a sus miembros más vulnerables con la ferocidad de una familia unida. Y bajo el árbol de durazno, mientras las estrellas comienzan a brillar en el cielo despejado de octubre, una niña que antes vivió en silencio y miedo, ahora planifica en voz alta un futuro lleno de posibilidades, protegida por un guardián que ha encontrado su verdadero propósito, rodeada por una comunidad que ha aprendido que la verdadera fortaleza viene de proteger a quienes más lo necesitan.